Let's talk to Bert Baum, who's here today. Thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome.
Good
Always
to see you.
nice to be here.
Very well. It's great to have you here today, and you're going to give us kind of an update of what's going on with Third, right?
Yes. I thought first I'd like to talk to you about something that's come up very recently, and that is washer and dryers in our three-story buildings in Third. We are looking at an updated policy regarding washers and dryers. Kurt Neiman, who is head of our alterations department, is bringing all our standards up to date. At our last meeting, we discussed a resolution related to washers and dryers, and what came up was the question, should there be washers and dryers in the three-story buildings? As it turns out, in 1998, Third Mutual passed a resolution banning all washers and dryers in the three-story buildings. However, there are the washers and dryers there, we know that, and many of them, or some of them, we're not quite sure what the number is, were installed previously and they were approved. And the board discussed this particular issue. We have, it's definite, if you have washers and dryers that have been installed in the three-story building without any approval, they are illegal. And upon inspection, and inspection occurs when you sell your unit for sure, you will be obligated to remove them.
Okay.
Now the question is, what about the washers and dryers that have been approved that are there? Are they grandfathered or are they not? Well, some of the board thinks they are, and some of the board thinks they're not. So this standard is now in the 30-day waiting period, which means since the last board meeting, less than a month ago, this is a chance to review it, to hear resident comments, and then to decide. So we will bring this issue up again and vote on it at the next meeting. If in fact we feel we need more information, then we will postpone it. But we want to assure people out there we're not going to do anything hasty, and we will certainly take into consideration what their needs are.
Okay. All right. Very good.
Now, what I'd like to talk about mainly is our residency policies and compliance task force. That's a mouthful.
Yes.
Okay. This is a task force that I chair, and we've been looking over, now it's almost 3 years, various aspects of disciplinary actions in the Third Mutual, the kinds of activities that should be more closely looked at, and we've been doing that, as I said, over a period of time. So I'd like to give you an update of where we are on this, and it reflects what we discussed at our latest meeting. And what we've asked the compliance department under Francis Rangel to do is to give us reports monthly on what the status is of the various violations.
Okay.
Okay, and I'll give you a quick rundown on the ones we have for June. There's still a total of 474 disciplinary cases out there. So there is a lot of activity in this area. And 135 of them are new. And 111 over this past month were resolved. Now, what are the leading violations? Number one is clutter. This is not necessarily serious, but it's ongoing. We have 177 cases of clutter, and this is a overall picture, and it involves clutter in carports, could be patios, in cars. So definitely we want to try and control that. Number two, and this is more serious, is illegal occupancy. We had 62 new ones reported, 23 new ones reported this month, and we still have a total of 62 that have been unresolved. And what does that mean, illegal occupancy? That means room rentals. If you are an owner of a manor, either you rent out the whole manor or you don't. You can't rent out rooms. And some people still don't realize that. Also, you can't rent them out for less than 60 days. And you have to follow all our procedures to do that. And some people don't do that. They advertise it. They don't advertise it in a senior that it's in a senior community. And when we find these ads, we act, okay? And many times there are people living in these units who are not authorized at all. They're renting them, but there's been no application filed to do that, or the lease has expired. And number three, there are actually two that are tied, involves alterations, where people are violating our alteration standards. They're putting in alterations, but they're not getting proper approval. And I just want to say, if anyone is thinking of doing any sort of alterations and you're really not sure, please visit our alteration desk. It's on the second floor. And this month we got 50 new alteration standards that were violated, and we're really putting a lot of emphasis in this area. So a lot of them involves contractors also parking illegally, contractors working hours that are not permitted, creating noise, smoking, and these sorts of activities. And again, that had 50, and we had 51 related to care providers. I'm going to talk a little bit more about care providers.
Okay.
But we are requiring care providers to be registered. So what are we doing about it? As part of the meeting, we discussed a matrix that will be developed, because the problem we have is it takes so long to process these violations and complaints. Right now, the situation and the process runs something like this. If someone sees a violation, or security might see a violation, they report it, and that has to be investigated. And that's done by our compliance department working in conjunction with security. Our compliance department is now part of security. They have special people assigned to work on this. If, in fact, the investigation verifies that there is illegal activity, then the person is given a notice, and if they've given 10 days to comply. If they don't comply, then they get a notice, another one, for a hearing. And the hearing takes place in front of our executive committee, which is made up of board members. So this is a long process. As I said, it can take 45 days. The executive committee only reads once a month. So how are we trying to fix this? We're trying to do that by developing a matrix. And this is something what it looks like. This is a disciplinary matrix. And what it does, I don't know if you can get that.
Yeah, it's probably a little hard to see. Yeah.
Well, I'll just give you a breakdown on what some of them is. There are 3 classifications that we want to have now. One is where a hearing is scheduled immediately, so we don't go through the whole process. If you are, for instance, not complying with our variance, you are giving a notice and a hearing scheduled immediately. And we just passed, actually, a new resolution related to that at our last board meeting. And if there's injury to a person or damage to property, if there's a hazard that might cause a fire or safety or health, if you don't pay your assessments or your chargeable services. These will be the types of violations that are immediately scheduled for a hearing. Others follow the more normal hearing process, and there's such things as landscape violations, such as too many plants.
Right, right.
And let me see if I have a couple more. Well, hard surface noises. Can be a nuisance. In some cases, it's smoking, some kinds of traffic violations. So there's a whole laundry list of things. And if you are, as I pointed out, doing some things related to rentals. So this will be published. I think it's also going to be discussed at the Finance Committee meeting tomorrow. And some we just give you a courtesy notice, and that's mainly clutter. But what I want to point out is we are really a law-abiding community. Only about 20% of the people require some sort of action beyond the initial notice. Most people want to do the right thing, and a lot of them just do it through negligence or ignorance. Okay, so the next issue that I'd like to talk about, and that we talked about at the meeting, is unoccupied manors. We now have a system, well, there's always been a system, but we are tightening it up, of identifying and visiting unoccupied manors. It turns out we have about 110, or we started out with 110 in Third Mutual. And what we want to do is, many of them, or most of them, are owned by absentee owners, people who are not here. So Kurt Neiman is going in and looking at this with security. And what we're interested in is, what's the condition of these manors? And some of them have been vacant for a number of years. We're looking for dry rot, we're looking for mold, water leakage, and also, and sometimes we uncover evidence that actually they're not unoccupied, but people have been living there. So this process is starting out after the inspection. A report is written up and the owner gets it. If there is an emergency, however, we have the right to go into the manor immediately. And part of this involves having a key to get in. And we have a key program, and we ask our residents to participate in it. If there's no key, then we have a locksmith. We will enter it and take care of the immediate situation. So there are two other issues. One I mentioned before, that's care providers. There's a lot of concern about care providers in the community on the part of our residents. We find we have a very low compliance with the care provider regulations, the requirement to register. If you have a care provider, you must fill out a form, and the care provider must be registered with our state. There's a process for this. If you are hiring a care provider from an agency, they are all registered with the state. However, many people want a private care provider, not going through an agency. They may feel that it's a cheaper way to go, and many of these are not registered. So we have actually a working group, and Susan McInerney, who is our new Director of Social Services, is really playing an important role in doing this. So what are they trying to do? This is a group that's composed of people from social services with Susan, compliance, security, and community service. And they hope to reach a goal in 30 days. They've been working around it, which will come up with a simplified, improved process. And what we're looking for is not to be punitive. We're looking to get our residents to feel comfortable that we will work with them. We will help them get the registration for these
Okay.
caretakers, okay? And so the major concerns that we have is when we have caregivers, and the reason we came up with this policy is there can be a danger to our residents. If a caregiver is not registered, if he hasn't had a background check, which is part of the process of getting registered, he creates a danger, an immediate danger to the resident hiring him and to the community. So our major concern is to keep the community safe and to keep our residents safe. And the other aspect is when a caretaker comes in here, we want to make sure he's not misusing, or she is not misusing, our facilities. Some of them use our laundry rooms excessively. They go to a swimming pool, etc. So we want to make sure that the right people are there for the right reason.
Okay.
Okay, so I will encourage our residents to know we know what the problems are and we're working with it, and we're going to have a solution. The last topic is leasing, okay? 27% of our manors are leased in this community. That's been a pretty steady number. It's a fairly high number. It's almost a third. And unfortunately, there are some violations related to people who lease. And we, years ago, had a policy. We've firmed it up. We require an annual renewal of leases, but there's been some pushback on that. People are complaining about the fees. The fees just now reflect our administrative costs. So they may seem high because for many years that wasn't done. But we're still working to simplify that process too, simplify the paperwork. People will have to fill out an application every year. They feel there may be a lot of work involved. So we want to make it simple for them, and this will come about too.
All right, very good. Well, I appreciate all your updates today. Thank you very
You're
much.
welcome. Nice to be here.
We will see you again. Now, will you be back on? Yeah, you'll be back on a few times.
Well, I don't think so. This may be my swan song. I'm leaving the board at the end of this term.
Yeah, but that's not until when?
Well, I'm always eager to come back and speak to you. Under
All
any
right.
kind of
Well,
guise.
good to see you, and I'm sure we'll see you back again.
Okay,
All right,
thank you.
take care. Bye-bye. We'll be right back.